Hello guys, welcome to Academy on Air. My name is Dave. Today we're going to be talking about smart bidding, so how we can reach the right customers with at the right time using smart bidding. So a bit of background on ourselves. As I said, my name is Dave. I'm working as an account executive in the UKI. I'm working primarily with some of our largest and highest potential lead gen clients, and then also I'm a smart bidding specialist in the UK.
And I'm Charlotte. I'm also working in our UKI market as an account manager, working primarily with our lead gen clients as well, and also acting as smart solutions specialist.
Brilliant. So to give you a little bit of an idea of the agenda of what we'll cover today, there's lots to cover, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So please do feel free to fill in your questions. So we'll look a little bit about how smart bidding has gotten smarter, so how it has evolved over time. Then Charlotte will take us through choosing the right bid strategy. So once we've identified the right one for your business, how do we then go about the implementation and what are the best practices of that? Then I'll bring us through evaluating performance. And then, as I said, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So just a little bit, I suppose, housekeeping to begin with. So this is a sort of a prerequisite to smart bidding. Any of our smart bidding strategies will use the conversion tracking tag because they will be optimizing towards a particular conversion action. So all of them will use conversion tracking. And then for Target ROAS, you'll see at the bottom, which is the target return on ad spend bid strategy, that'll actually use the conversion value as well. So if we're passing revenue into the account. So once we have those, then we're ready to get going. And then a little bit, I suppose, about how smart bidding has gotten smarter and its need to evolve over the last couple of years. So as you may know, if you've been using Google Ads for quite a period of time, things would have started previously with a keyword bid and everybody was on desktop essentially. But over time, as we know, with the rise of mobile, introduction of tablets and other devices, as well as just the kind of a multitude of other things that come into play in a consumer journey, like the amount of research people are doing, things have gotten a little bit more complicated. So bidding is becoming, while it has been initially a very important element of success, it's become more complex and more important. So how, I suppose, will smart bidding help us to navigate some of these challenges? So firstly, it'll work faster than we can ourselves. So to give you an idea, in every auction, we'll be looking at roughly 70 million signals in the blink of an eye in order to be able to determine the correct bid for that individual auction and that user. It'll also help us work smarter towards our goals. So actually a recent report by Boston Consulting Group was looking at how people spend their time when they're working with Google Ads or working with in digital marketing in general, and 80% of the time was spent on kind of manual tasks, so manual bidding and reporting and things like that, and only 20% being spent on more strategic areas like new categories, new markets, creative testing, attribution, that sort of stuff. So this will actually allow us to flip that to a degree. So we'll still need to be looking at bidding and how the bid strategies are performing, but it'll free up almost a day of our time to be able to look at more strategic business focused goals, which has been really impactful in particular for a lot of our clients. That's been, aside from the impact of the bidding strategy, the increase in time has been massively important. And then finally allows us to win more customers. So it kind of does what it says in the tin. It should be a more efficient bid strategy. So at a high level, using one of our bid strategies, Target CPA, which Charlotte will cover, can generate a 20% increase in conversions at or around the same CPA. And using responsive display ads can actually lead to a 50% uplift in conversions because we're getting access to more inventory and we're showing more personalized and relevant ads. But a little bit more to come on that later on. I suppose with the additional level of complexity and with the changes in consumer behavior becomes a need to simplify in some areas. So you see on the left here, we have obviously started to include a whole range of additional signals. So not only are we looking at device and geo and things like that, but we're looking at, recent browsing behavior. Are these people in market for particular products or particular services? Have they been to your site before, similar sites before, things like that? So really kind of informing it with a much richer data set. But then we've actually looked to actually simplify how we can report on this and how we can see whether or not it's effective. So it's a lot more transparent in the interface. You'll see the bid strategy report now has been really, really useful for showing you information like how bid strategy has been performing, but also things like conversion lag and other areas like that. And then a bit of a sneak peek you'll see here in the blue. So very relevant for omni-channel advertisers who are also trying to drive store visits, but being able to optimize towards a return on ad spend, including offline behavior. So people actually going into store and making a purchase, which historically has been very difficult to measure. So I suppose the main takeaway on this slide here is smart bidding is becoming an awful lot more accessible, but also useful for advertisers. So as we move towards these fully automated bid strategies, not just enhanced CPC, we're focusing on business metrics is really what these are looking at. We've also removed the minimum conversion threshold for 2 of the smart bidding strategies, so Target CPA and max conversions. Historically, they may only have been available for sort of medium to larger sized advertisers, but actually removing those thresholds as the bidding algorithms improve has meant that for smaller advertisers, they've been accessible and very efficient, or very kind of attractive bid strategies to use. And then finally, we've actually have improved compatibility with media platforms. So the likes of third-party bid strategies, we can also layer on an element of Google Smart Bidding to kind of cater to signals that are not available to external third parties. Here's just a little bit of the detail of what I was talking about in terms of the lower conversion. So you'll see here, for max conversions in Target CPA, there's no longer a minimum conversion threshold. So you can start those campaigns even with 0 conversion history. With Target ROAS, we do still say that you have a little bit of conversion history, so 15 over a 30-day period. If your individual campaigns don't quite get to 15 conversions, Charlotte will run through a little bit later on and how we can get around that. So really, what is the difference when we look at manual CPC versus smart bidding? How does that really work in practice? So if we look at the right-hand side, so manual CPC and third-party or media platforms. So what we're typically doing there is we're setting a keyword bid, and we're maybe making some adjustments at the device level and the geo level based on historical performance on a certain date range. Then once that's implemented, we test how that performs over a period of time. We see what the results were, and we go back and we make another change and we let it run for another period of time. So to an extent, we're kind of looking in the rearview mirror quite a lot on really broad date ranges. And then if we look at the media platform element, while they might be making more regular bids, it still might be only every 6 to 8 hours. Which, with the way that the auction moves and how dynamic it can be, we need to make sure that we're setting the right bid for every single auction. So that's where the fully automated bid strategies will come in. So we'll be looking, like I said, at 70 million signals in order to set the right bid for that individual auction. So whether that is a person in North London searching on a mobile device at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, or whether it's somebody in Birmingham on a tablet at midnight during a weekday, we'll be able to determine the differences in them and set the correct bid based on the goal that you would set. And then finally, just having a look at some kind of broad result metrics that we've seen. So max conversions in Target CPA, we can expect to see about a 20% uplift in conversions at the same or similar CPA. So if you think about that in real terms, in business terms, the growth there in terms of conversions and also the time saved every week, that really is something that can be quite transformational for a lot of businesses. And then if we look at Target ROAS on the right-hand side, which for us, I think, and the people that we work with, it is the kind of holy grail and the one that we want to go for, because it goes that level deeper, not just looking at conversion action, but what is the value of the conversion. So Target ROAS, you can expect on shopping campaigns a 35% uplift in conversions, which is fantastic. So I think Charlotte next is going to take us through how we can actually select which one of these might be best for the business.
Yeah, so Dave spoke a little bit about, I guess, why smart bidding strategies are becoming more important to our businesses and our business metrics. And now we're going to have a look at how do we choose the right bid strategy to align with those business goals.
So here on the right-hand side are our main fully automated bidding solutions. So here we have maximize conversions, target CPA, target return on ad spend, and maximize conversion value, which is available currently on smart shopping campaigns. The main three we're going to run through today are maximize conversions, target cost per acquisition, and target return on ad spend. On the left-hand side, you'll see grayed out we do have enhanced cost per click, which we would consider a semi-automated strategy, as you do still set your own manual CPC bids. But when we chat about smart bidding solutions, we're really talking about these three in the middle there. And that's going to come down to what goal your business has. So is it a case of we're looking to maximize as many conversions, as many sales, as many leads as possible? Maximize conversions might be the best one for us. Versus if you do have more specific goals around a specific acquisition cost or a specific ROI metric, target CPA or target ROAS may come in as more valuable assets there. A quick tip here, in our new Google Ads interface, you will see the recommendations tab. You'll also see a beta tool there called our optimization score, which will give you a percentage score out of 100% based on, I guess, the hygiene and health that's currently in the account. That will give you different recommendations based on the campaign data in the account. So you might see some recommendations here around a certain campaign being a good fit for maximize conversions or target CPA, for example. Do leverage that. It's a great one to see what will be a good fit based on your account data, and also give you some good metrics on what type of uplift you can expect. But looking at maximize conversions for a moment. So maximize conversions does exactly as it says. It essentially looks to drive as many conversions as possible within a specified budget. And the great thing with maximize conversions and with target CPA, as Dave mentioned earlier, is that we don't have any threshold needed in terms of conversion data. So you can start from 0 conversions at a campaign level to start with maximize conversions, no problem. It's available to use straight away. This, I guess, is probably ideally used if you don't have a specific CPA or ROAS goal that you're looking to achieve, and you're just trying to drive as much volume as possible. Another important aspect to note here is that maximize conversions will work particularly well with limited by budget campaigns. So if you find that you have a campaign or a number of campaigns in your account that are getting that red limited by budget flag, maximize conversions is a great fix to get as many conversions within that limited by budget campaign, if it's the case where we can't increase that budget at this time. And finally, then, we do want to note that it'll work best with campaigns that have less than 90% impression share. So essentially, if we do have less than 90% impression share, we've room to grow into and capitalize on more opportunities in the auction. Target CPA then, again, this is going to come in where you do have a particular cost per acquisition or cost per lead goal that you're looking to stay under or at for all of your conversions. So we look to drive more conversion volumes within that target CPA that you set. This can be a great fit for any business model. So whether it's an e-com business or a lead gen business, omni-channel business, if acquisition cost is the metric that you go by, target CPA is going to be the best fit for you. And again, we can start from 0 here in terms of conversion data. It's ready to go with from the offset.
One thing I just add on that is, like, it is extremely efficient on search, and I think that's where people think of it a lot of the time. But particularly for display, this is always one. This or Target ROAS is always one that I would recommend, just because with search we are anchored to a keyword, so to speak. But with display, we're targeting quite large. While they're relevant audiences, we want to make sure that there's some feedback loop to say these are the placements, these are the audiences that are working best. So that's why with Target CPA in particular is a fantastic one for display.
Yeah, we've been seeing great success with CPA and display recently. Yeah.
Yep.
Another example here would be Van der Schuwe, for example, who saw 153% increase in their conversion volume using Target CPA.
Well pronounced.
I tried. Finally then, Target ROAS. So as Dave alluded to earlier, Target ROAS really, I guess, is the pinnacle for many advertisers where they are very ROI focused. So this is going to seek to get the highest conversion value possible. So that's looking to maximize your total revenue at a particular target return on ad spend. And important to note, when you're looking at the Google Ads interface itself, Target ROAS, or ROAS as a column, will look at the conversion value divided by cost column. So if you look in there, you'll see what your current ROAS is, and it's ideal to make sure that we set that target to start off with. So setting an achievable ROAS target that is in line with what you're currently achieving, and then we can make incremental increases or decreases down the line as needed. It does say here it's available for display, which again works fantastic on. It is also available for search and shopping campaigns as well. And for that, we do need a minimum threshold to target return on ad spend. So we'd look at having 15 conversions passing through the account over 30-day periods, ideally 15 conversions at a campaign level. But if it's the case where you're having some smaller volume campaigns which maybe aren't reaching that 15 conversion threshold, there is a possibility to essentially group campaigns together with a portfolio bid strategy. And that would basically tie them together with a common ROAS goal, and it'll help you get past that 15 conversion threshold if you need.
Another example here of where Target ROAS has worked particularly well for an advertiser of ours, but I think in particular myself and Dave have seen fantastic success with Target ROAS over the past year or so, particularly with the travel industry client, right?
Yeah, so we work with a travel insurance client who, they sell the policies online. They initially had been working to a CPA goal when they were bidding manually, but after being able to include the revenue values and bid to a ROAS, because the insurance policies, obviously, depending on the length of the location, can vary, it allowed them then to actually set different ROAS targets per campaign or location, and then maximize out the value of what they're getting in them. So it's actually worked really well from them moving from manual to CPA to including revenue and finally moving to Target ROAS.
So again, it's just all about bringing the focus back to the business metrics and KPIs that actually matter, and return on ad spend is going to align very well with that. So now we spoke about the different strategies that are available, how to pick the best one for you, but very important as well is implementation and best practice around smart bidding strategies. So there's a few best practices here we will have a quick run through of. So the first being a very, very important one, making sure we're not analysing performance whilst the bid strategy is in the learning period. So when you move to a new bid strategy, or when you make any drastic changes to the actual target itself, smart bidding strategies will go through a learning phase of typically 10 to 14 days. But that may be shorter, may be longer based on our conversion delay. So that brings us to point 3 there. Very important to take into account the conversion lag between click to conversion when we're analysing performance. And you'll see this in the search attribution part of the Google Ads account. You might see, for example, that on average it takes your customers 3 days to convert, and that might be your conversion lag. And if that is the case, then it's important for us to take a 3-day look back window when assessing the performance of our campaigns. Because if we don't use that look back phase, we won't be getting all of the data available to us.
So I was going to say on number 2.
Yeah. Go for it, Dave.
Well, I was going to say, so sometimes people think that when they enable one of these campaigns that they can just set whatever, they can set a CPA that's ideal, or like half of what they've been getting historically. But I think setting the CPA or the ROAS based on what you have been getting in the last 30 days is always a good starting point, because it allows it to be realistic and allows it to kind of learn a little bit faster. That doesn't mean that we're tied to that. It means that we can still reduce that over time or increase the ROAS goal that we have. But it's just as a starting point to make sure that we're successful from the beginning, to look at last 30 days as your target.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about setting an attainable goal at the start, because the idea with these strategies is to drive more conversions at a particular CPA or more conversion value at a particular ROAS. So setting it up for success at the start, set it with that achievable goal that it's historically achieved over 30 days, as Dave said, and then down the line we can look to make incremental changes if we do need to move it towards a more efficient target. Another very important metric or thing to take into account here is looking at the right metrics when we're assessing the bid strategy. So if that's ROAS, looking at conversion value and the ROAS column, or if it's Target CPA bidding, looking at conversions and the actual cost per acquisition. Do ensure that we're not budgeted or limited by budget, when it comes to your campaign budget. So if we are capped there, essentially we won't have an opportunity to grow within that campaign. So do make sure that you're uncapping your budgets, particularly with Target CPA and Target ROAS, to capture the full opportunity. And finally, then on best practices, do make sure that we're not looking to make any major changes to campaigns, particularly when it's in the learning phase, because we do need to essentially let the bid strategy learn what works and what doesn't, and optimize towards the target we've set. And with smart bidding strategies, it's really important to feed it the right signals. So there's going to be a few other elements here, such as smart creatives and audience lists that are going to feed into bid strategy to make it as efficient as possible. So the more information we can give it and the more accurate information we can give it, the better the smart bidding strategy can perform to your target. So do leverage smart creatives such as responsive display ads, responsive search ads, to make sure we're using the most impactful ad creatives with our smart bidding strategy. And then always focusing on the right people with our audience lists. So whether that's engagement pack lists or all visitors, all converters, do ensure that we feed the strategy all of those accurate signals so we can focus on the most qualified people. And finally, critically then, attribution is a big feeder into smart bidding strategies. So do ensure that you're not using a last click attribution model. Do look at more inclusive ones such as data-driven or time decay or linear, depending on what fits best with your business model, to make sure that we're having an inclusive view of the entire customer journey that will feed into that smart bidding signals as well. Final thing to note when we chat about best practices and implementation on bid strategies is that smart bidding strategies such as maximize conversions, target return on ad spend, and Target CPA are more than equipped to deal with seasonal spikes. So many of our different advertisers will experience seasonality throughout the year, whether it's university clearing or travel in January, retail at the end of the year. Smart bidding strategies are still your best bet there to get the best performance. So there's no need to go back to the likes of manual or eCPC bidding. But what we will have a look at is if there's adjustments needed to the actual target, if you're using Target CPA or Target ROAS. So when we chat about seasonal spikes, they do fall into two buckets. So we'd usually look at longer trends, which is 3+ days, versus sudden spikes, which would be 24 to 48 hours. Now, most trends, I think you'd agree, Dave, would likely fall into that longer trends bucket of 3+ days.
Yeah, exactly. Like we'd be looking at stuff like Charlotte mentioned, so travel and particularly finance in January, and then also that slower run up at Christmas. But Black Friday being the classic example, so that there's rarely something that has such a sudden spike. So Cyber Weekend and Black Friday in particular, there's lots of omni-channel and e-com advertisers within our team who have been running Target ROAS or Target CPA over that time period and have been extremely successful as a result, because it actually allows them to adapt to those changes in conversion rate an awful lot faster than somebody would be if you were bidding manually over that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. So still the best bet to maximize your performance. But one thing you should have a look at is do look at past seasonal events. So if you are falling into this sudden spike bucket of a flash sale or something like a Black Friday event, look at past events that have occurred. So maybe last year's Black Friday or a previous season's flash sale, and see what, if any, change there was to the conversion rate. And if there was a drastic change in your conversion rate over a 24 to 48 hour period, and by drastic we mean double or more the conversion rate, do have a look at adjusting your CPA or ROAS targets to reflect that. So in that case, you'd look to increase CPA or decrease the ROAS target to take into account the increased conversion rate. But as I said, most people fall into this longer trends bucket where no change is needed. And to reiterate, another very successful strategy here using ROAS bidding, which helped drive 18% increase year on year in return on ad spend, and actually a 61% increase in conversion rate as well for acute marketing during Black Friday.
If you think about it as well, like at that time, for something like Black Friday, that could require people being like working around the clock, updating bids consistently, and that may only still be every couple of hours. Like during that time period, having something like Target return on ad spend in place that's doing all of the heavy lifting, and then allowing you to be focused on other areas at that kind of critical or peak time, can allow for successes like this.
Certainly. Dave will have a chat through about evaluating performance. So when we change to a bid strategy, how do we evaluate if it is performing better?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say we've selected the correct bid strategy based on our own business goals. How do we actually figure out if it is outperforming what we might have been doing previously? So there's a couple of things just to make sure that we're keeping an eye on. So first is the learning period that Charlotte had discussed earlier. As you mentioned, this will vary depending on kind of the volume of conversions and clicks that you're actually getting, but anything between 10 to 14 days is a good time period. So at this stage, the bidding algorithm is testing different bid levels, testing what works. So this is where we want to figure out how long will it take for this to be optimized and performing to the target that we've set. Next, we want to look at what is the conversion lag. So in a lot of cases, the conversion won't be happening on the same day of the click. So on a given day, so for example, today, we will have cost data showing, but the conversions are still going to trickle in. So once we know what that conversion lag is, and we can get that in the AdWords account in the search attribution report, we have a good basis of how many days conversion lag is there for when we're actually testing the control window. So for example, if I was looking at how Target CPA has been performing for me in the last couple of weeks, I would measure it all the way up until maybe the end of last week or beginning of this week to allow for those conversions that would still be trickling in. And once we figured out kind of how long is the learning period, how long is the conversion lag, we can kind of move into a testing window or a testing phase. So this is maybe an example of one that we might use. So we'll have our pre-control period. So that's 2 weeks of, let's say, the manual bidding that we're deciding we're going to work on. And we measure what is the impact in terms of CPA or ROAS in that time period. Then we'll implement our smart bidding strategy and allow the learning period to pass. So that will be, again, available in the bid strategy report. And then once it's fully optimized and out of the learning period, we enter the post-control period. So this is the 2 weeks that we're going to compare to the manual bidding 2 weeks that we did previously. So we have that 2 weeks run. We leave the conversion lag, so the 2 or 3 days for those conversions to trickle in. And then we have a pair of 2 week periods, so manual and fully automated, that we're comparing against one another. And then we're comparing what has been the difference in conversion rate, cost per acquisition, click-through rate, and overall conversion volume. So that gives us this is maybe 3 tools that we can use. So the one on the far right is the one I just discussed. So it's the pre and post metric analysis. The one thing I would say about that is that there is other factors that will come into play. So maybe a seasonal change or other things in consumer behavior that can impact the difference in results. So the 2 on the left, first we have target metric comparison. So that's very simply, we've set a target CPA of £5 or a target return on ad spend of 200%. Are we hitting that goal during the time period once we've left that learning phase? And the goal is that we are. But if we're still maybe a little bit unsure and we want to do a head-to-head test, we can look at drafts and experiments, which launched a couple of years ago. So drafts and experiments will allow us to select a number of campaigns. We can split the traffic for that campaign. So usually 50-50 is what we'd recommend. And we continue to run one half on manual bidding, and then we implement smart bidding on the other half, and we let that run. So we're doing as close to a head-to-head test, the same campaign at the same time as we can. So that's been really useful just in kind of finally proving out the value of smart bidding solutions. So to quickly recap before we go to the Q&A, we've covered how smart bidding has gotten smarter. So the changes that we've made in order to make sure that smart bidding is focused on business metrics and that it's catering for all of these different changes in the consumer journey. So we need to determine what business goals are we going to go for and what strategy will we use. So for some people that will be cost per acquisition, and for others that will be target return on ad spend if we're maybe e-com advertisers. But there's also max conversions if we don't have unlimited budgets and we're trying to maximize volume. Then when we actually have selected one and we go to implement, we want to make sure that we're adhering to all of the best practices that Charlotte went through. So feel free to go back through this deck and run through each of those individual best practices. And then once we've implemented it or we're testing it, we want to make sure that we're evaluating the performance correctly. So making sure that we're adhering to the learning period, the conversion lag, and kind of using the right testing ground for those smart bidding strategies. So I think we'll go to the Q&A now. So hopefully we have a couple of questions in there that we can cover. So Leon asked the question, what are the accuracy of performance against CPA or ROAS targets? Spend can get out of hand if CPA is much higher than target. Will it be possible to see it from some archive?
So I think one important thing to notice there for Leon is in terms of the accuracy of performance against CPA or ROAS targets, that's going to come down to the best practice of how you set the target. So really critical, as we said, not to just set your dream CPA or your dream ROAS target, but to firstly set an achievable target. And that's going to be based on the historic CPA or ROAS that it's achieving. So what I would do there is I would look at your campaigns over a 30-day period, look at the cost per acquisition or look at the ROAS, see what it's achieving, and set it at a campaign level to be in line with that. And then if you find that down the line that maybe isn't as efficient as possible, you can make incremental decreases or increases. We'd usually recommend maybe a 15% change in terms of making it more efficient, and doing that gradually to reach your goal a little bit more. But if you do set it at an achievable goal to start with, it should be highly accurate in terms of achieving that once we get past the learning phase and give it time to adjust.
I think the other thing then is this is how smart bidding should work. So realistically, this will be learning from what does work and what doesn't work. And I think if we see that the CPA is high, that may still be at a learning period. So making sure that we are being patient enough to know that we have the learning period. And once it is optimized, it will then be optimizing to what works against your target. And it answers the question about, will it be possible to see it, to see this in kind of one place? Yes, we'll be able to see that in actually the bid strategy report. You'll be able to see all of those details and be able to test head to head. And if you change the CPA target during that time, it will tell you what is the average CPA target that existed at that time. And you can see how it performed head to head.
Sure. We have another question here. So someone is asking, I implemented responsive display ads and it resulted in the campaign pretty much ignoring the targeting. So how do we benefit from responsive display ads without being shown to the entire world?
I think what may be happening there, we probably need to check it in the account, is that responsive display ads shouldn't alter the targeting that you're using. So in that campaign, you may have been running some sort of display auto targeting. So whether that was conservative or aggressive. What responsive display ads will do is it'll give you access to more inventory because you're not limited to the old ad formats that we would have been looking at previously, and it'll resize, it'll appear on native, but that wouldn't mean that it will go beyond the existing targeting that you had. So I would just double check the targeting settings that are on the account to make sure that there's no auto targeting. If you go to audiences or keywords or placements in that display campaign, and if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see display automatic targeting as a line item, and you may see that there's actually stuff populating in there, so you can toggle that on or off during within the settings tab.
Yeah, just double check your settings there, because responsive display ads are brilliant in terms of having better impact and better inventory across the display network. But as Dave said, it shouldn't affect targeting, so do check in on your settings there. I think that is all the questions for today. So thank you all for tuning in. And as we said, this will be available at the same link if you'd like to look back at the deck at any stage or follow up on any to-do items. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day. See you later.